You're listening to History's Hidden Weird, the podcast that digs up the strange, the forgotten, and the downright gross corners of the past. I'm your host, Quinn Strange. And today, we're diving into the story of a man who drank vomit in the name of science. That's right. Buckle up, this one's not for the squeamish. Let's travel back to early 19th century America, around the year 1804. The place? Philadelphia. At the time, the city was grappling with a terrifying killer, yellow fever. Outbreaks had struck the city in waves, particularly in the 1790s, leaving thousands dead. People were terrified. No one really understood how it spread, what caused it, or how to stop it. Enter a young medical student named Stubbins Ffirth. Yes, that was his real name. Stubbins Ffirth. 2FS. A name you might expect from a Dickens novel or maybe a Harry Potter background character. But Ffirth wasn't fictional. He was very real. And very, very determined to prove a theory. What theory? That yellow fever was not contagious. At the time, people had two major theories about disease. One was that illness came from miasma, bad air. The other was contagion, that you could catch a disease from someone else. Ffirth had noticed that yellow fever outbreaks seemed to happen more often in the summer and disappear in winter. He figured that if it were contagious, it would spread year-round. So he concluded, perhaps too quickly, that yellow fever wasn't passed from person to person. And he set out to prove it, in the most stomach-turning ways imaginable. Now, most of us, when we have a scientific idea, we look at data, maybe run some tests, maybe conduct a survey. Stubbins Ffirth? He got his hands, and other body parts, dirty. Let's start simple. Ffirth began by exposing himself to the bodily fluids of yellow fever patients. We're talking blood, sweat, saliva, urine, and vomit. He would rub infected fluids into small cuts on his arms. He'd smear them into his eyes. He even inhaled the fumes from vomit and applied it to his skin. But here's where it gets truly horrifying. Not satisfied with surface-level exposure, Ffirth decided to ingest the fluids. Yes. He drank them. Not metaphorically. Literally. He drank the vomit of yellow fever patients. Ffirth heated some of it to reduce the acidity, he said. As if that made it better. In one of his notes, he described it as slightly bitter, but not very disagreeable. Yeah, okay, Stubbins. He also tried boiling it, evaporating it, inhaling the vapors. At one point, he even fried a piece of yellow fever-infected liver and ate it. This man was not well. Now here's the kicker. Ffirth didn't get sick. Not once. So he concluded that yellow fever must not be contagious. Case closed, right? Well, not exactly. We now know why he didn't get sick. He was working with late-stage patients. Many of the samples he used came from people who were already dying or had been dead for some time. By that point, the yellow fever virus wasn't active or transmissible anymore. In other words, he was testing expired vomit. Which, in a weird twist, probably saved him. But he didn't know that. He thought he had bulletproof evidence. He published a book of his findings in 1804 titled A Treatise on Malignant Fever, where he laid out his unshakable confidence that yellow fever wasn't contagious. Spoiler alert, he was wrong. Today, we know that yellow fever is contagious, but not through direct contact. It's spread by mosquitoes, specifically the Aedes aegypti mosquito. That discovery came decades later, thanks to scientists like Carlos Finley and Walter Reed, who figured out the mosquito connection around the turn of the 20th century. So Ffirth was wrong in his conclusion, but ironically, his methods kind of helped advance the discussion. He proved that bodily fluid alone doesn't transmit the disease, and though he didn't find the right answer, his disgusting dedication became part of the larger puzzle. Science, after all, is full of wrong turns that still lead somewhere useful. So who was Stubbins Ffirth? He was born in 1784, and by his early 20s he was already knee-deep in these experiments. He never became a household name, and he died young, in 1820, at just 36 years old. His experiments were largely forgotten until later historians unearthed them and went, "Wait, he drank what?" He remains one of the more extreme examples of what happens when curiosity meets poor judgment and zero-gag reflex. There's something almost admirable, in a totally unhinged way, about how far Ffirth was willing to go to prove his theory. He wasn't content with speculation. He wanted to test it on the most intimate level possible. But it also raises a question: at what point does bold science become reckless madness? Today, ethics boards and medical standards would never allow what Ffirth did. And thank goodness. But in a time before germ theory, before microscopes revealed the invisible world of viruses, sometimes it took a little vomit drinking to move the needle of understanding. Disgusting? Absolutely. Effective? Sort of. Memorable? Oh yes. That's it for today's episode of History's Hidden Weird. If you liked this story, or if it made you dry heave just a little, consider sharing it with a friend who loves weird history as much as you do. I'm Quinn Strange, and until next time, maybe stick to coffee instead of questionable scientific cocktails. If you liked today's episode, leave a review, share with your weird history-loving friends, and hit follow. Have a strange story you want us to cover? Comment below and we will see what we can do. Stay curious and stay weird.